They handed me a bouquet and an exit speech like I was supposed to smile and thank them. I stood in the wings of Charleston Symphony Hall, black suit pressed, batons still in my pocket, listening as they applauded me off my own stage. 42 years in music, 17 of them with the Charleston Philharmonic as principal conductor. And just like that, I was, quote, transitioned into emeritus status to make way for a newer, younger face with, quote, digital era appeal. My name is Olivia March. When I started at the Philharmonic, we had a shoestring budget, a part-time harpist, and played to half-empty auditoriums. We ended with sold-out subscription seasons, Grammy shortlists, and a youth outreach program that reached 7 counties. The applause was polite, some of it even sincere. I nodded, bowed once, walked off. Backstage, Elise, our new managing director, gave me that trademark smile, wide, polished, meaningless. "We'll always be grateful for your contributions," she said. "And we'd love your insight during the transition," I smiled. Said nothing. I had already seen the new conductor's press kit. Luca Vega, 31, Berlin trained. Sharp cheekbones and a TikTok following. His headshot had replaced mine in the lobby that morning. They didn't even bother to wait for my final concert. I walked home that night. Refused the car they offered, needed air, needed to hear the city without a score behind it. The streetlights flickered through a thin mist, casting long shadows over the cobblestones. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That came later. What I felt then was quieter, like the silence after a symphony ends, before anyone dares to clap. An emptiness that echoed. They thought I was finished. But the thing about a conductor, we never stop listening. 2 weeks after my farewell concert, I found out they'd cut the education program. Not formally, wasn't in a press release. Just a quiet line on the orchestra's website. Youth partnerships paused during 2025-26 season as we reimagine outreach strategies. I called Janice, the violinist who helped me run the program since the beginning. She'd just come from rehearsal. "They're shifting focus," she said carefully. "More contemporary work, more online presence. Fewer buses full of school kids, I guess." She didn't say Luca's name, but she didn't have to. The board wanted a younger audience. They wanted clicks, not crescendos. Luca gave them exactly that. Flashy repertoire, electronic overlays, a Stravinsky remix that made headlines for all the wrong reasons. And Elise? She was already pitching a docuseries to streaming platforms about the reinvention of American classical music. They called it Evolution. I called it Erasure. One of the outreach kids, Marcus, found me on Facebook. He was 13 when he picked up a cello in our summer program. Now he was a senior. Accepted to Juilliard. He messaged me. They said I can't volunteer this year. "Do you know what's going on?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the message until the screen blurred. The next morning I pulled a dusty folder from my bookshelf, a curriculum I'd written 12 years ago. Intro to Orchestral Language. A series of lessons designed for kids who'd never seen a violin up close. The kind of thing that had built our youth program from 3 schools to 20. By the time I finished reading through it, I had the beginnings of something more. I called Marcus. "Still planning to be in town until fall?" "Yeah," he said, unsure. "You still have that cello?" "Of course." "Good," I said. "We're going to play," he laughed. I didn't. That afternoon, I visited an old friend, Harold Green, former trumpet player, now running a community arts center out of a decommissioned church on the east side. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. "You want rehearsal space?" I nodded. "And players?" "Eventually." Harold studied me for a moment, then gestured to the back room. "We've got folding chairs and a Steinway with a cracked pedal." "Perfect," I said. He paused. "You starting another orchestra, Olivia?" I smiled for the first time in days. "No," I said. "I'm starting a revolution." We held our first rehearsal on a Tuesday night in the echoing nave of the old church, beneath a stained glass window of St. Cecilia that had faded to soft gray blue. 5 chairs, 1 cello, A piano that sighed when you touched the keys. Marcus played Bach. I sat at the piano. It was rough, a little off-tempo, but honest. 2 days later, word got out. Janice dropped by with her violin, claiming she was just curious. Then Harold dug his trumpet out of storage. Then Lila, once first chair viola at the Philharmonic, now working admin at a law firm, sent a text, "Still have my bow. Still remember how to use it." By the end of the second week, we had 9 players. No salaries, no tuxedos. Just folding chairs, borrowed stands, and a hunger to play without polish. We called ourselves the Ledger Ensemble, a joke at first about musicians keeping tabs on what they're owed. But it stuck. Not quite an orchestra. Not a protest, either. Something in between. Meanwhile, the Philharmonic debuted its new season with a performance that had drones flying over the audience and dancers in LED suits during Mahler. The local arts blog called it an ambitious collision of sound and spectacle. Others weren't so kind. Too much tech, not enough touch, one review said. Looks good on camera. Sounds like static. Marcus read the comments aloud during rehearsal. Lila smirked. By the third week, we had a waiting list. Not for seats, for players. Our Sunday matinees drew families, teenagers, musicians who hadn't touched their instruments in years. People who didn't want subscriptions, they wanted connection. After one concert, a woman came up to me, maybe 70, in a wool coat 2 sizes too big. "I heard your hands before I saw your face," she said. It sounded like someone remembering. That stayed with me. Elise reached out soon after. Her email was as polished as ever. "The Philharmonic would love to host you for a guest conducting slot in our winter series. We believe the community would benefit from your presence." I didn't answer. 3 days later, she sent a second message, this time more personal. "Luca struggling to connect with the brass section. There's tension. Some of your old section leaders have expressed interest in your return." Still, I didn't answer, because what she didn't understand, what she never understood, was that I never belonged to the Philharmonic. The music did. The people did. The silence between notes. The stories buried in every crescendo. But the title? The chair? The politics? They could keep it. Because while they played for applause, we were playing for something else. We were playing to be heard. The newspaper article came out on a Wednesday front page of the local arts section. From symphony to sanctuary. Olivia March's quiet return. It wasn't flashy. No profile shots. No PR quotes. Just a journalist who slipped into one of our rehearsals, took notes quietly from a pew, and wrote about how the music made him feel like he remembered what music used to be. By Friday, the phone was ringing. Not just local schools and donors, national arts networks, podcast producers, an invitation to speak at the Mid-Atlantic Composers Forum. I ignored most of them. I wasn't building a brand. I was building a place where players felt whole again. That weekend, we played Copland's Appalachian Spring to a standing crowd. Folding chairs overflowed. Some sat on the floor. One woman brought her newborn and cried through the entire Shaker melody. Afterward, Harold found me in the back hallway grinning. "You realize what you've done, right? Broke a fire code?" He shook his head. "You gave people back something they didn't know they missed." The Philharmonic responded in the only way institutions know how. They threw money at the problem. Elise launched a Rediscover the Roots campaign, invited alumni back for a one-night concert. Posters went up all over town with my face on them. An old photo I didn't approve, under the headline, "The Return of a Legend." I hadn't agreed to anything. Then the board chair called me directly. Patricia Langford. She was part of the old guard, someone who used to fight for the youth program before Elise started calling it a low ROI initiative. "We'd like you to conduct one piece," she said. As a gesture. A gesture of what? Of unity. Of healing. I almost laughed. "I was fired, Patricia." "There's pressure," she said quietly. "Ticket sales are down. Press is circling. You've become complicated." She didn't say it, but I heard it loud and clear. I was becoming too visible outside their control. You want me to clean up a mess I didn't make, I said. We're offering full-season guest privileges, she added, and a donor-backed grant to rebuild the youth program. That part made me pause. Because the kids? They were never part of the politics. They were the reason I stayed for 17 years. But this wasn't about one concert. One grant. This was about who got to decide what music meant in this city. So I gave her my answer. I'll conduct one piece, I said, but not with your orchestra. Silence. I'm bringing ledger. The night of the performance, the Philharmonic Hall filled to capacity for the first time all season. People came dressed for tradition. Pearls, velvet, cufflinks. But the air didn't feel like reverence. It felt like curiosity. Half of them were ledger regulars. The other half had come to see what I would do. I arrived early with the ensemble. The Philharmonic staff tried to usher us through the side entrance. I walked through the front. We wore no uniforms, no black gowns or tails, just what we always wore. Neutral, comfortable, simple. Marcus carried his cello on his back like a sword. Lila wore her father's jacket from his first concert in 1964. The program listed as second half, one piece only. I chose Barber's Adagio. No fireworks, no gimmicks. Just raw, slow, aching beauty. Luca opened the concert with what Elise had billed as, quote, a visionary new fusion of tradition and modernity. It was ambitious. Electric instruments layered with Vivaldi and a spoken-word artist reciting over the violins. The audience clapped. Politely. Uncertainly. Then we took the stage. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked at my players. The ones who'd followed me out of the system. The ones who played because they had to, not because they were paid to. And I raised my hands. No baton. Just breath. We began, and for 7 minutes and 21 seconds, no one coughed. No one shifted in their seat. The air didn't move. The silence between notes felt like a heartbeat held too long. When we ended, I dropped my hands, and the room stayed silent. Until someone, maybe a child, maybe a cellist's mother, whispered, "Thank you." Then the applause came. Not thunderous, but real. Afterward, Elise tried to shake my hand. I nodded once. Nothing more. I had nothing to say to her. She'd heard the answer. The next morning, the city paper ran the headline, "One piece, one conductor." Everything changed. Luca announced a sabbatical a week later. Elise resigned before the month ended. The board reached out with a formal proposal to merge Ledger into the Philharmonic. To quote, unify tradition and innovation. I declined. Instead, we accepted a residency at the Community Arts Center where it all started. The cracked Steinway. The folding chairs. The neighborhood kids who started showing up with secondhand violins and wide eyes. We didn't need their stage. We'd built our own. And the city? It listened. Because sometimes the most powerful music isn't the one they expect. It's the one they never saw coming.